With the release of JJK Phantom Parade taking my wallet by storm, a lot of questions have arisen. Who are these two new characters? Who's this guy? A weird mix of Kaneki Ken and Solid Snake by the looks of it. And, of course, who is our new villain?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the...
This is our villain. He really looks like an original character made for this game. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Who knows? This guy is Oboro, but he would be a topic for another day if this video does well. But for now, let's talk about these two. Kaito Yuki and Saki Rindo. But before we jump into the video, I gotta say, I love Phantom Parade. It's a dope mobile game. Please sponsor me. You could also like, comment, subscribe for the videos or whatever. I don't really care. Shilling for JJK PP is more important. Just saying, Gege, love the game. Help me out. But let's get the obvious out of the way first. Are these guys canon? Probably not. I think these characters, like movie villains from Dragon Ball, they appear in a place in time where it wouldn't be possible for them to canonically exist. Same sort of scenario with our new sorcerer students, Kaito and Saki. So, Kaito Yuki and Saki Rindo are members of Jujutsu Tech. However, they are a part of the Fukuoka branch campus of Jujutsu Tech. Why haven't we heard about this unmentioned section of Jujutsu Tech that also has students and teachers? They basically play it off for a joke by having no one recognize who they are and not hearing of them. No one really knows who they are besides like Ichiji and Yaga. It's stated by Yaga to be an extension of the Tokyo school, but since it's so small, no one in the Jujutsu world has really heard of them or its students. I mean, it's part of the plot that the Fukuoka branch is so small, it's going to be discontinued, so it makes sense from a plot perspective that no one's really heard of it. But the way that Saki specifically is introduced is that a strange cursed energy is kind of appearing in Fukuoka, and despite how peaceful it should be down there, high-level curses are appearing. So Nagino, this guy, the principal at Fukuoka, took Saki with him to Tokyo so he could ask Yaga for help dealing with this strange high-level cursed energy. So Gojo just sends our main trio to Fukuoka.
というわけで、ユージたちは明日から福岡ね。え？大丈夫。飛行機はもう取ってあるから。荷造りだけすれば OK。フライトは明日の朝ね。
The reason this more than likely isn't canon is that the Fukuoka trip would take place after the Origin of Obedience arc, so the Iso and Kechizu fight, if you remember, but before Shibuya, whilst there is a bit of a time gap in between the Iso and Kechizu stuff and the end of the Hidden Inventory flashback, so it does make sense, like this is the most logical place to have these events happen, like literally at the end of Season 1. Despite that, however, the scale of the events that take place in Phantom Parade are on like a relatively large scale. I mean, we have another villain obsessed with the 10 Shadows and stuff. He's also clearly like special grade level curse, and since characters in JJK get stronger with each fight, if the events in here were canon, by the time these characters get to Shibuya, they'll be a good chunk stronger, and obviously none of these events or the characters met here are mentioned at all in the anime and manga. This is obviously due to them not being created yet, but it makes it harder to defend them as being canon in the main canon JJK timeline, so it just doesn't really work. Granted, it could be argued that it may be canon, but we'd kinda need the whole story of Phantom Parade before we make those judgments, but it's fair to say that Kaito, Rindo, Nagino, and Oboro most likely not canon. I mean, look at this guy. As much as I am enjoying this game, I'm kind of okay with the fact that he's not canon. Anyway, you know why we meet these new characters now, but let's actually talk about them specifically. Kaito Yuki and Saki Rindo, both of these sorcerers are first years, just like our main trio. The two of them also at one point had their lives saved by Nagino, and also we know both of their curse techniques, but beyond that, these two don't really have too much in common. But let's start off with Saki, as she is the character that we meet first chronologically, as she's trying to kill some cursed spirits and as she's trying to compete with our main trio, and she just kind of acts rude to begin with, and it makes sense when you just kind of take a step back and look at her design. So this girl is an ex-Yankee delinquent Bosuzoku, like an ex-gang leader, and she states this herself, as if you couldn't tell from the fact that she says ora when she punches or her bleach blonde hair despite being Japanese. She's very much a classic Yankee. Think Tokyo Revengers or a better series like GTO, like old school delinquent. And to that end, she also dresses in a sailor-style school uniform, which is also pretty old school, old biker gang aesthetic. So it makes sense, her design and character are pretty simple, right? Just standard anime blonde-haired delinquent. She also quickly becomes like Nobara's sidekick and starts calling her Baronet, like Sister Nobara. Like she starts following her around and acting like her kyodai. It's crazy.
あんたって人は釘崎さん、いや、野原さん。何よ急に近いんだけど。マジかっけーっす。尊敬したっす。これからはバラネーと呼ばせてください。はあ
Her character and personality is also incredibly simple. She just goes around punching things, has respect for people who are also strong, you know, very simple character. Outside of her character and design though, which is pretty simple, she fights cursed spirits to try and keep the Fukuoka Beach campus open, despite it literally only being 3 people in a whole ass school. But let's be honest, this is not what you want to know about, right? So let's get into how she fights, as well as her curse technique and that sort of stuff. So for starters, she doesn't fight with any cursed tools or anything like that, but what she does fight with are these talismans wrapped around her hand. I assume she does this just because they would do more damage, since they look very similar to the seals around Yuji when he's originally captured at the beginning of the series, and they also fit with her brawler delinquent design, so it fits pretty well. Now, time for the big elephant in the room. New characters are shown to us, and the question on everyone's mind is obviously, what's their curse technique? Well, in name, it's called Catastrophe Reversal Curse.
最下天樹
Right, like it sounds like really super impressive and unique. However, whilst it is a cool ability, it also kind of feels like something Gege himself came up with, in my opinion. And let me explain why. Firstly, despite its namesake, Catastrophe Reversal Curse isn't a reversal technique, nor does it make use of anything to do with reverse curse technique. There isn't really any healing going on here. The ability itself boils down into converting damage / pain she takes from battle and converting it into cursed energy. It's pretty much a berserker typed ability, right? The more damage she takes, the lower her health, the more damage she can do, the bigger buff she gets to her cursed energy. The reason I say such a relatively simple curse technique feels as if Gege wrote the ability himself is because the ability, whilst not being anything unique, is very similar to an ability from Hunter x Hunter, which is something we all know is a heavy inspiration for Gege. Basically, Rindo's Catastrophe Reversal Curse is a poor man's equivalent of Phaeton's Painpacker / Rising Sun. The ability is described in a very similar way. The buff he gets from his Nen ability scales to the amount of damage he takes. Granted, Phaeton's ability are also said to take on multiple other forms depending on how angry he is or how much damage he takes or whatever, but given how often clear parallels between Togashi's work and JJK are presented to us through the anime and manga, this feels like an apt comparison to make. Although there is a small distinction to make between these two abilities besides the obvious, okay? I mean, Painpacker is dope as hell, and Rindo's CT is okay, but one thing about Catastrophe Reversal Curse that is a little interesting is that the physical pain she takes when using this ability just kind of goes away. She says it goes away, but that doesn't specify whether or not that means she doesn't feel any pain at all, or it's just dulled a bit by the curse technique. It's unclear. However, the fact that it negates the pain to at least some degree allows her to push her body a bit further, meaning that the CT kind of acts like a painkiller alongside its main ability, decreasing the pain you feel from damage, so you'll take more damage in turn, increasing your cursed energy, so you can do more damage. It's pretty neat. Nothing too complex, but it's still pretty interesting. Not much else to say beyond that regarding Saki. She's a pretty simple character. I mean, as we know from that Shibuya statement from Kenjaku, curse techniques are a reflection of a sorcerer pretty much, and that is embodied well with Rindo. She's a simple, straightforward character with a simple, straightforward ability. She can't Black Flash or anything crazy like that. I don't know either of their grades, but if I had to make an educated guess, I'd say they're between grade 2 and grade 3. But regarding Rindo, she's just your standard punch and kick merchant, because JJK needed more of them. Now onto the other man on campus, Kaito Yuki. He has a little bit more to him, but not too much. At the end of the day, despite the format that this narrative is presented to us is in the form of visual novel type cutscenes, that doesn't mean the narrative or its characters will have as much complexity as visual novels. Granted, this probably just stems from the fact that at the end of the day, it is a mobile game, and the stories in mobile games are usually kind of expected but not cared about. I mean, who actually knows what's going on in Dokkan Battle's story? Like, it has one, but no one actually knows what it's about. So it's impressive enough that JJKPP has an actual story to it that's interesting, but I digress. Yuki, no relation. To sum him up quickly, he's kind of a dick. So out of the entire JJK cast, the closest person I can compare this guy to is, quite funnily, Usami, which is a bit wild, but I say this because upon us meeting Kaito Yuki, he is immediately abrasive in a similar way to early Gaku Ganji. The higher-ups on Jujutsu law state that we must execute Sakuna's vessel, so straight away, he comes off looking real bad, right? Constantly talking down to Yuji and just being a bit mean, along with his boring haircut, weirdly tall boots and cuffed sleeves. Your immediate reaction to Kaito is that he's just rude, really. Doing what the Jujutsu laws state, placing orders from his superiors above all else. He's like an evil version of Kusakabe, right? Without the dope fashion sense. Now, this, in hindsight, is incredibly funny. as despite these very unpleasant characteristics that Kaito has, constantly being down Yuji's throat for being Sukuna's vessel, not wanting to acknowledge him, you know, standard stuff in JJK. Despite this, he's pretty much a coward, at the start at least anyway. I mean, if you want to know how much of a douche this guy is portrayed to be to us, at least initially, Nagino asks Yuji to spar with Kaito, right? Kaito, not wanting to go against the superior's orders, abides. Yuji and Kaito spar, and it is made abundantly clear that Yuji washes him quite handily. Then Yuji makes note of the fact that Kaito uses a dagger-styled cursed tool to fight with, so he gives him some pointers about using that styled of weapon, as he's used Slaughter Demon in the past. Kaito takes this info and believes he can grow stronger with it, as no one around him uses cursed tools, so he appreciates the input. But instead of thanking Yuji, like a regular human would, he says that he was trying to kill Yuji during their sparring session, as that would allow him to both follow his orders from Nagino, as well as follow Jujutsu law. In spite of this, Yuji just flat out says,
よくねえよ。ま、さっきの感じなら殺す気でやられても負けねえと思うけどさ。
yeah, brother Kaito, you are fodder. But however, Yuji still gives him pointers, despite Kaito being a literal POS here. Then, later, the main trio and Rindo fight a group of cursed spirits in a random building in Fukuoka. Kaito Yuki, the sorcerer goat that he is, just pretty much puts up a curtain and waits outside. You know, he doesn't want any part of it. Whilst he's staying outside, however, away from the fighting, because of course he is, he gives a brief explanation of his cursed technique. Boost. Night Hunt.
行きます。呪連素術。了解。
It's a supportive barrier technique. He can make circular barriers around himself and others, and he can also use it to basically make a curtain that makes it nighttime. So his curse technique is just a straight up barrier technique. His curse technique is to make barriers, an ability you can learn without a curse technique. That sounds kind of trash as a CT. However, he wasn't telling the whole truth about his technique. Basically, some stuff happens with the plot, the Kyoto school students show up, everyone gets trapped in a cursed spirit's innate domain, then Yuji and Kaito get separated from the other students, and Kaito realizes that Yuji is really strong and not a coward like him, and it inspires him to fully use his curse technique, and it's pretty interesting. And it's pretty self-explanatory if you just actually looked at the name of the ability. Kaito puts up a barrier and puts a quote-unquote curse on the people inside the barrier and forces them to fight, and he can boost the cursed energy of people he chooses in said barrier. He can seemingly just put a barrier on anyone and boost their cursed energy, pretty much. When Kaito says he puts a quote curse on them, I think this is just a weird translation, and it actually means he's put them in some sort of binding vow scenario. So he puts a binding vow on the two inside that makes them fight. Kind of the reverse of the Kuchisake Owner and Judgment. Whilst you can't have any aggression in those domains, here you have to fight. We don't know the scenario of what happens if you don't fight, but there is some sort of binding vow there. The example we see shows Kaito putting up a barrier with Yuji and a cursed spirit inside, boosting Yuji's cursed energy in the process. The interesting thing about this is that whilst Yuji is fighting this cursed spirit, like this leader, Kaito can still remain active. He can still fight and protect himself whilst his curse technique is active, which is pretty cool. I'm unsure if the barrier part of the CT or the binding vow parts must be active at the same time for the curse technique to activate. So for example, can he boost someone's cursed energy without putting a barrier around them? I don't know, but this is like the most supportive support ability you could have in JJK. It's just a flat buff of cursed energy to others. Granted, I don't know if he can do it to multiple people at the same time either. Like, can he buff a full squad? I mean, in gameplay, obviously he can, but I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see when more of the story of JJK Phantom Parade comes out in English. Also, something really cool about this ability is that during the battle alongside Yuji, Kaito is kind of being a coward and getting flustered and surrounded by cursed spirits. So Yuji does a Piccolo moment and takes a hit for him.
Yuki! 情けない。認めないと息巻いてきた虎杖裕二にただ助けられるだけなんて。
Kaito then gets angry with his own cowardice and starts to take the pointers about how to use daggers from Yuji to protect himself. The reason I bring this up is that this cowardly attitude is tied with his curse technique and his nature as a sorcerer pretty interestingly. He trains to fight, but when it comes down to it, he struggles, so others have to fight for him, and his curse technique reflects that perfectly, boosting those who fought to protect him and then fight alongside him. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I thought it was a pretty cool tie-in between his curse technique and, in turn, his character. In conclusion, I think these two characters and their curse techniques are pretty cool. Nothing overly complex by the looks of it, and Phantom Parade is a pretty fun game, and it gives me an excuse to make a video with visual novel footage, which is something I haven't done on this channel in years. Also, JJK Phantom Parade, please sponsor me. If this video does well, I'll probably make a video on Oboro, but that video would be a little bit shorter since there isn't much to talk about as of yet. But who knows, maybe I'll get around to making the next light novel video, but we'll see. So, with that being said, toodles my doodles, hopefully I see you in the next one. Peace.